and this is actually rather important when you're valuing a firm. You want to look at whether or not this margin is deteriorating or improving. It's operating income. This is different from operating cash flow. Divided by sales. Roughly speaking, operating income is equal, roughly. Not exactly, but roughly. But we're more interested on two more things. Return on assets, aka ROA, which is net income divided by sales. Oh, not sales, I'm sorry. Total assets. It is, after all, return on assets. This is a way of looking at how much money you make without worrying about whether you have any debt or a lot of debt. It's kind of an unleveraged version. A firm that may be 98% debt financed versus 2% debt finance will have the same divisor. And there is the leverage version that people look at, return on equity. In fact, shareholders are more interested in this. That's obviously net income divided by total equity. Every once in a while, total equity of the firm is negative. For example, as you have seen last week for American Airlines. In that case, this doesn't make too much sense. It's how much money you make per dollar book value. That's important. That's the book value. These things are kind of all related. We're going to define one more number. Let's call that equity multiplier. Shortened as EM, and this is shortened as ROE. And EM is 1 plus debt equity ratio. And I'm sure you don't particularly care about my spelling mistakes. And I'm not going to for your assignments. This is not an English class after all. Did I tell you about the grading rubric a chemistry professor has done? I started the other section. I had to take an online course to be able to certify it as an online teacher. And it was probably the biggest waste of time I had ever in my life. But, you know, bureaucrats must be served. So I took the class. And one of the assignments was develop an assignment for your students on your field and write down a rubric to grade that assignment. Again, I don't believe in that stuff, but you do the assignment that you have instead of the assignment you'd like to have. And which I'm going to change right now. I'm going to revolutionize the field. I'm going to give students the choice of assignments. But that's in the future. There was one chemistry professor, and we were to comment on those. So randomly, a chemistry professor's assignment came to me for me to give some critique to it. 40% of the grade was based on your spelling, grammar, and overall quality of the English. It's goddamn beginning organic chemistry. What do I care? And typically, students who take those classes, on average, their ability to speak, write, and understand English is a lot less. It's not a criticism, it just happens to be that they tend to have back 1987, I started a PhD program in economics in Boston College. There was a class that I had already kind of taken. So I asked them, can I instead take a class from mathematics department? They said, sure. I took a class in foundations of mathematical logic, where you have to prove things like 1 + 1 = 2. You take it for granted, but there's actually proof for that. It's horribly long because you start from almost knowing nothing in order to prove that. You cannot assume the rest of the algebra. You only have definitions and rules of logic. Anyway, there were 9 people in the classroom, professor, me, and 7 other students. It was only me and professor who could actually speak any English. The rest, the 7 were Koreans. It's a class in mathematics. The language itself is mathematics. Who cares whether you speak English or not? I mean, Paul Erdős had horrible English, I heard. But Paul Erdős was a guy who had over 200 co-authors. And there is a identity, this is called DuPont's identity, that kind of ties together these measures. It says ROE is equal to PM times TAT times EM. And there is also, I have something I call Baby DuPont. Baby DuPont says ROE equals ROA times EM. Now, the higher is the EM, that means the higher is your debt equity ratio. You use more of other people's money. The higher is that multiplier. So if you're earning 10% on the assets, your debt equity is 1, and your return on equity is 2, or 20%. There is another thing I call Baby DuPont. ROA equals PM times TAT. Can you guess why this is called DuPont's identity? Or DuPont identity? Well, it's kind of a esoteric information. It's called DuPont's identity because it was for the first time used in the company DuPont. DuPont Chemical Company. Okay, that's why it's called DuPont's identity. There is no other reason for that. But if you think about this, it's kind of useful. It says, you tell me that your ROE is 30%. But where is that coming from? Are you getting a high ROE because you have a high PM? You get to keep more of your sales as income? Or, barring that, are you good in managing your assets? Using $1 of assets, how many dollars of sales you generate? And the third is, okay, you may not be that good in all of them, but you have goddamn leverage. Okay? You use other people's money. I may not make that much money on the asset, maybe 2%, but if I have an EF of 10, I'll get an ROE of 20. Of course, the trouble with that is when you have that much debt, even the smallest things are gonna make your ROA go below 0, and you're gonna multiply a negative number. You know, it's like the Hattori Hanzo sword. If you don't know what you're doing with it, it's gonna cut you. And technically, you can derive this yourself by multiplying ROA, for example, by 1. Remember, ROA is net income over sales. Oh, net income over total assets. If you multiply this with sales over sales and rearrange, and you probably realize that the first one is the definition of PM and the second one is definition of total asset turnover. Let's stop here. Again, I'm going to have that survey. Please do that survey. It's anonymous, and we'll make a decision. I'm not going to start it on chapter 3. If we do it, it's going to start in chapter 6. But I want to know your opinion first. And remember, chapter 2 quiz is due tomorrow night.